So I used to do a fair bit of vlogging. I was all on that Casey Neistat hype, but two important things got in the way of it. All right, so there's the pandemic, and then there's the soul-crushing social anxiety of walking around with a big camera with a big poofy microphone on top. So the thing is, in the age of TikTok, I think as long as you're not actively disturbing people, no one really cares what you're doing if you're walking around pointing a camera at yourself. But what I wanted to do was design a audio system that was a bit more conspicuous when vlogging. And I do want to say though that you don't need these gadgets to make good videos, just start with whatever you have. But let's see if this new system can be a bit more conspicuous, maybe give us some more options in terms of audio management. And we're going to cover that all in this video. All right, so what is the system that I came up with? Well, the system is based on the Tentacle Sync system. So this is two devices working in tandem with your camera and your microphone. So the first is the Tentacle Sync E. So the Sync E basically outputs timecode into the camera. It can write it into an audio track, or if your camera has a timecode input. And then there's the Track E system. The Track E is basically a portable recorder, and it syncs timecode over Bluetooth with the Sync E. So this has timecode written to an audio file. It has 32-bit float recording, so you don't have to worry about, peaks or clips. And while it has a 3.5 millimeter input that can basically take in any microphone, it is mainly designed for lavalier microphones. It's like a small body pack that you clip onto yourself, and that's what you use for recording. Now for the microphones, it does come with its own microphone when you buy the Track E system, and that's similar to kind of like any standard prosumer wireless lavalier. It's not a professional one. So because this is YouTube, let's go for a little bit of extra overkill. We'll use professional lavaliers, so we're going to use the Shure Twinplex lavaliers. All right, so what's the problem with the tried and true shotgun microphone setup on top? Well, you got to keep the microphone fairly close to you, so you need to use a wide angle lens. If you use like a further lens or prime lens or portrait lens, it won't be able to pick up your voice too well. So you're basically just limited to wide angle lenses. And this kind of limits your ability to frame yourself. You're basically always in a wide angle shot because you need someone to basically be close to you with the microphone. Now you're probably thinking, okay, well, why not use a traditional wireless lavalier set like the Sennheiser AVX? The problem with that is the batteries die on it quite fast. Like they die after a couple hours on one of the components, whereas on the Tentacles, these things can last for about 10 hours. The other thing too is that these are 32-bit float recorders. So if something loud really happens, like we have the crows screaming in the background or a car drives by, you won't distort or crack your audio. You can always recover it, which is quite handy to have. And because it's timecode synced and not based on the number of inputs you have on your camera, you can have multiple people join. So let's have Ira here. So if we were vlogging together, say hi, Ira. Hello.
Hello.
Then you can have multiple tentacles synced up, and you basically can have a podcast on the go if you want. So how does this all work together? So basically you're going to want to turn on your Track E, pretty easy. And then when you turn on your Sync E, you want to make sure to hold down the switch so it goes into green mode. And green mode, basically it's outputting timecode. Now you're going to want to go into the Tentacle app, and you're going to want to set the frame rate. So the frame rate is going to be determined whatever you're filming on your camera. So, 24 or 30 FPS. You can go into higher frame rates, but let's just stick with the standards for now. And then after that, you're going to want to sync the Track E to the Sync E. Now the Track E comes with a 16 gigabit, not sure, but it comes with a memory card. So you connect those devices together, you make sure they're synced. Now the Sync E will have to get plugged into your camera. So if you're using like a DSLR or mirrorless camera, you're going to put the audio output into the audio input. And I like to adjust the level so it's about minus 12 dB in the camera. That's it getting the audio timecode. And then you're good to go. You just leave those on, you start the recording in the app, and whenever you turn your camera on, it'll be recording the audio timecode. So you go about your day, you do your recordings, and then when you're done, you're gonna go to your computer. So there's actually this Tentacle Sync Studio software, but it's only on Mac OS. But basically once you export your files, You put them into the software and then it'll automatically sync up all the different files and tracks. So if you're doing like a multi-camera shoot, as long as you have Tentacle sync timecode going in, it'll be able to detect it and sync it. So once you do that, then you can output an XML file. So this can work in Final Cut, it can work in Premiere, and pretty much when you open up a sequence, all the tracks will be laid out nicely. And this is pretty good actually if you're vlogging, because it gives you a nice like basic timeline already, a simple edit, if you will, of your day and what you recorded. Now, if you're on PC or you don't use Final Cut or you don't use Premiere, then you're gonna wanna definitely use Resolve. So it doesn't have a way to output this into like a Resolve project file, but Resolve can actually do things like detect the audio timecode and sync the tracks via timecode. So you can actually automatically sync the timecode and it'll basically put the audio file together with the track. And because if you listen to the audio on your camera, it's just that nasty timecode sound, but it'll sync these together and then you can edit them like normal and they're linked clips. Now, if this doesn't work, you're basically at the mercy of macOS. The only time I found things have been a bit janky is like if you're recording during because it's on a military clock. So if you record from, 11 o'clock to midnight, sometimes Resolve can't manage that and you need to use a sync software. So just be careful. Like if you're getting around midnight, maybe stop your recording, then wait until a bit of time after that, then start it again. It's the best way to do it. But it's an extra step, yes, but at least it's pretty easy to use. All right, so what are the cons to the system? Well, the first is you do have to wear a lavalier. And with the lavalier, you can mount it different ways, but if you want to put it in the right spot and under your clothing, then you probably will have to tape it to yourself. And depending on the environment you live, this can be uncomfortable. Like we're in the Singapore heat and humidity, so it gets kind of scratchy afterwards. The other thing too is, depending on the lavalier you use, like this isn't a problem for the one that it comes with, but for example, with the Twinplex microdot system, the microdot connector can become kind of loose, which means that it will basically kind of disconnect and the audio becomes distorted. So you always want to check your Tentacle Sync app to make sure that your audio is coming in good. So as I mentioned before, this is quite an expensive setup. To buy the track key and the sync key, you're already dropping around 500 USD. And this is basically twice the price of buying a Video Mic Pro Plus from Rode, which has a lot of features tailored for vlogging and stuff like that that will make your life a lot easier, and you won't have to do any syncing in post. Another thing too is that if you're looking to do like an IRL streaming setup, this doesn't really integrate well with that setup because it doesn't have live audio monitoring. Like if you start recording, it cuts it off. And even if you're not recording, it's a bit delayed. It's not one-to-one sync. So the good thing with not having the big microphone on top is now you don't look like a vlogger kind of just standing out of nowhere. And maybe you just look like someone who's just a little bit too hardcore about their selfies. So to kind of wrap things up, did this satisfy like my goal of creating a more conspicuous incognito vlogging setup, also one that had more audio flexibility and audio options? Yes, it did. Now we can add as many speakers or guests as we want. The 32-bit means that we don't need to worry about losing audio or having poor audio. We can always have something that we can recover or fix. And yes, only having the Sync E on top of the camera makes it a bit more conspicuous. You can hide things. And yeah, it's a really great system, but I think it's prohibitively expensive and it requires some inconveniences like, being able to properly put on a lavalier mic to get the best quality out of it. So I don't really see it becoming a mainstay for vloggers, but it was fun to experiment, fun to try out, and it will have its uses here and there. But if you have any questions about the Tentacle system, if it's a sync key, the track key, or how you're syncing it in post, let me know in the comments. Thanks again for watching. Glad you can join us on this video, and take care out there.